Hi, and welcome to the comprehensive Tailwind CSS tutorial. So if you're looking for a CSS framework that offers flexibility, customization, and scalability, so you have come to the right place. So Tailwind CSS is a popular utility-first framework that enables you to build the responsive, modern, and user-friendly interfaces with ease. So in this tutorial, we will guide you through the fundamentals of the Tailwind CSS, including installation, configuration, some core concepts such as utility classes, responsive design, customizing the styles, and a lot more, and we'll be building some projects along with it. So by the end of this tutorial, you will have a solid understanding of how to use the Tailwind CSS to streamline your workflow and create beautiful web designs. So let's dive in and let's get started. And if you don't know about this channel and you don't know about me, then I'm Nikhil Tadani. I'm the instructor at the Indian Coders and I make several videos on the latest technologies like the React.js, the Next.js, the full stack frameworks like the MongoDB, Express, Node.js and so many things. So I create these videos on the latest technologies. So please subscribe me so that I can get some help from the YouTube to grow my channel. So that's it for the intro. So let's get started to the main content of this video. So welcome and let's start with the Tailwind. So what is the Tailwind CSS? So Tailwind CSS is a powerful CSS framework that can help you create the beautiful and responsive designs quickly and easily. So the main motto of the Tailwind CSS is you have the flexibility and you can easily style your website or application. So I'm Nikhil Tadani and I will be your instructor throughout this course, and this course is designed to you by the Indian coders. So let's see about some of the features about the Tailwind CSS. So Tailwind CSS follows the utility first approach. So this follows a utility first approach, which means that it provides a wide range of utility classes that you can use to style your HTML elements. And these classes are named based upon their values and their properties, like the text line centers. So it makes very easy to understand that how they work. And let's see the second feature, which is very customizable. So Tailwind CSS is highly customizable and you can configure the framework to include only the utility classes that you need. So it will help you to smaller the bundle size as well. So you will only be applying some styles that you need with the Tailwind CSS and nothing else will be added to your bundle. And let's see the third feature, which is the responsive design. So the Tailwind CSS makes it easy to create the responsive designs using the breakpoint system. And you may know about the breakpoint systems as we define in other frameworks as well, like the Bootstrap, Material UI. So we have the breakpoints according to the screen sizes, like for the small devices, for the medium screen sizes, for the large and the extra large devices. So you can add different classes for different screen sizes to ensure that your design looks good on all of the screen sizes. And another feature with the Tailwind is it's very easy to learn. And some people say that it is very hard to learn because you need to know and you need to be a professional inside the CSS, but they are wrong because the Tailwind CSS is very easy to learn, especially if you are just familiar with the HTML and CSS, and no professional CSS knowledge is required. Just a basic syntaxes and basic knowledge of the CSS is required with using the Tailwind. And since it uses the utility classes instead of the custom CSS rules, so you do not need to be an expert in the CSS to use it effectively. And even if you are stuck somewhere, so Tailwind has a huge community support as other frameworks do, so it would be very easy to implement and use. So this is all about the Tailwind CSS in the introduction section. So if you see the differences between the Tailwind and the other CSS frameworks, so let's have a look at the differences between the Tailwind and the Material UI. So the features offered with the Tailwind is it offers the utility classes to use in the elements. So we add the classes in the elements, so we do not use the components. But with the Material UI, it offers the predefined components, predefined set of components to use with the custom flexibility to build the UI. So Material UI provides you a UI tools that you can use to save you a lot of time for building the UI components. But with the Tailwind, it offers the utility classes, like you have a bit more flexibility to use with the CSS elements. You can design that from the scratch. You can design your own as well. So that's how the Tailwind works. And if you see the flexibility options, so the Tailwind is easy to use and flexible with customizing the CSS. And with the Material UI, so if we need to customize any component in the Material UI, then we create the style components for the custom styling. So that's how the Tailwind wins with the flexibility only. So that's why we use the Tailwind, and I will not argue that the Tailwind is good or Material UI is good. So both are good, but as per your requirements. So if you need to use the set of UI tools, set of UI components, then you can use Material UI. But if you want your design starting from the scratch by using the utility classes of the CSS, then the Tailwind is good option. So both are equivalent options according to me. So you have the choice to choose the Tailwind or Material UI. So now we'll be seeing the Tailwind inside this course. So let's work with the Tailwind. So now let's have a look at how we can use the Tailwind CSS with the Next.js. So we'll be installing the Tailwind with the Next.js. So we'll be using the Next.js, which is a React full stack framework. So the Tailwind CSS works flawlessly with the React and the Next.js, and you can use that with any other frameworks as well. Like other frameworks can be a Solid.js, so you can use that for the vanilla JavaScript as well, like for the Vue.js, you have the Remix as well. So you can use the Tailwind with any other frameworks as well, any other framework or library with that. So let's have a look at how we can install the Tailwind. So I'll be moving on to the Tailwind CSS homepage. So we have the tailwindcss.com, and this is the official site of the Tailwind. And then you can see rapidly build the modern websites without ever leaving your HTML. So it directly applies the styles to your HTML. So you can see here we have an example that you have the styles, like you have the screen sizes like the medium, you have the flex property for the medium screen sizes, and you have some styles like the BG slate, it means the background, and you have the text LG, it means the large property of the text, like it will increase your text size. And then you have a lot of options as well, like text sky 100. So every color inside the Tailwind provides you 9 options starting from the 100 to the 900. So you can use them according to your requirement. And then you can see you have some best practices, your APIs, and so many things with that. So let's click on the get started to install the Tailwind. So if you are using the vanilla JavaScript, then the process is again very simple. So you need to install the Tailwind inside that. So you need the Node.js as well before that. And if you do not have the Node.js installed, then you can move on to the nodejs.org and you can install the Node.js, and the process is very simple and straightforward. So, and then you need to initialize a Tailwind CSS with that. And once you run the init command of the Tailwind CSS, then it creates the Tailwind config.js file, which is the configuration file, which allows you to have some customization configuration with the Tailwind. And you can extend the theme of the Tailwind as well. You can use your own theme here. And then finally, you need to add these 3 properties of the Tailwind into your CSS file. So into your CSS file, you need to add @Tailwind base, @Tailwind components, and @Tailwind utilities. So the base provides you all base classes. The components provide you some of the components that you can use with the Tailwind. And then with the utilities, then you have the utility classes with the Tailwind. And then you can build that Tailwind as well with this. And then you can just use with the Tailwind with the HTML file. But we'll be using the Next.js with that. So we'll be moving on into the framework guides, and there you can see you have a lot of frameworks that you can use. You have the Create React app as well. You can have the Vite as well. You can have the Next.js. You have the Next.js. We have the Vite. We have the Laravel, Angular as well, the Solid.js as well. So you can use on any framework. So the Tailwind is same on any other framework as well. So we can move on and we can click on the Next.js, and you can see here we have the page of install the Tailwind with the Next.js. And then first we need to create a new Next.js app. So we'll be using the Next.js version 13.2, which is the official version of the Next.js with using the Tailwind. So let's start, and first let's create a Next.js application. So I have opened a folder in the VS Code, and you can do the same. So you can move on into the terminal, select a new terminal from there, and then what you can do, so you can move on and you can run the command of the npx. You can have the create -next -app, and then you can add the latest flag as well to install the latest version, like the latest. And then you can add the TypeScript flag as well. So you can have the --, you can have the TypeScript. And then you can hit enter. And then after hitting enter, you will be having this project name. So you can move on and delete that undefined, and you can use the my app like this. So you can have the my app, and then would you like to use the ESLint with this project? So we can click on the yes. And then would you like to use the source directory? So we'll be using the no, because we'll be using the main app directory with the Next.js. So we can click on the no. And then would you like to use the experimental app directory? So we can click on the yes. So we'll be using the app directory here. So import alias, you can use the @ as well. So you can by default click on the enter, and then what it will do. So it will now install a couple of dependencies, and it will initialize your new Next.js application within a moment. So let it install and let it create a Next.js application. So the new Next.js app has been initialized, and now we can move on into the app directory. So here you can see here we have the page file as well. So this is the route file of this main route, like the localhost port of the 3000. So this is the route file for this. And now we can move on to the Tailwind. So here we have the Tailwind, And now we need to install the Tailwind CSS. So we need to install these 3 development dependencies. So we'll be using the Tailwind inside the development because the Tailwind works inside the development. And then once we create our application, once we build that, so it will compile all of those styles inside the CSS file of our application. So we do not need to install the Tailwind inside the bundle because it uses the CSS utility classes. So what it will do, so it will just create a CSS file for all of these classes. So we can move on and we can just run this command npm install -d. So we'll be running this command. So before that, you need to move on into the directory of the my app. Then you can run this command. And after it will install these 3 dependencies, then you can move on and you can initialize the Tailwind CSS as well. So you can run this command as well, npx tailwind css init -p. And there you can see, after running this command, it will create 2 new files inside your project directory. The first will be the Tailwind config, which includes your configuration files with the Tailwind. And then it creates a post CSS configuration as well. So we are all done with that. And now the next step you can see, now we need to configure the template paths. So we need to tell the Tailwind that where it will find the files. Like here you can see inside the content, we can have the app directory as well. We can have the pages as well. We can have the components as well. And then we can have the source as well. So we need to tell the paths to the Tailwind, like where it will find the JavaScript or the TypeScript files. So what we can do, so we can move on and we can copy that. We can copy the whole file and then we can move on into the Tailwind. We can paste that here. So here you can see here we are using the app directory. So we won't be using the source. So we can remove the source as well. We won't be using the pages as well. So we can remove the pages. Because here we'll be using only the app directory with the Next.js. And inside the app directory, inside even the nested files, even in the more nested files, if it finds the JS file or TS file or the JSX or the TSX file, so it will add the TypeScript support to these files. So it's saying this, and now we can move on and then you can see finally, now inside the globals.css file, now we need to add these 3 lines of code inside that. So we can copy that and then we can move on into that. So we can move on into the globals.css. And there we can remove everything. We can just write these 3 styles over there. We have the Tailwind for the base, and then we have the Tailwind for the components, Tailwind for the utilities. And now we can move on and everything is done from our end. And then finally we can just run our application with the npm run dev. So we can move on and we can run this application with the npm run dev. You can see the steps are very simple. So you can see the experimental warning, and these are some warnings that you need to ignore. And then you can see the server is open on the port of the 3000. So now we can move on with the server. So here we go. Here we have the server running on the port of the 3000. So we have the get starting by editing this. And now we can move on, and there inside the page.tsx, then we can remove everything that we do not want. We can remove the whole main as well. We can remove that. And then we can remove all of the things from there. We do not need that. We can remove this font as well as of now. So now we have the export default function home, and inside the home, what we can do, so we can just return a div with the hello world inside that. So we can have the hello world. So we do not have anything. So we'll be starting everything from the complete scratch. And now to use the Tailwind, first you need to move on to the extensions and you can install the Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. So it provides you the auto completion with writing the Tailwind CSS styles. So now we can move on. So you can install that and then you can move on to the page file. And there you can see if you want to apply some styles to this div, you can provide the class name like this. So we can have the class name, and inside that, if you will press Ctrl and the space, so you get all of these styles that you can provide. So you can see these styles are there from the Tailwind. So you can provide these styles like this. And if you want just the font size to be increased, like you can have the text to Excel. So you can have the text to Excel, and then you can see if you will just save, if you'll move on to the application. So now we have the hello world inside that. And then you can see if I open the Chrome window here, and then you can see if I provide the 1XL, then you can see now the text size is smaller. And then you can see if I provide the 2, then you can see now the text style is bigger. So you can see now the Tailwind CSS is working fine. So now we have successfully initialized the Tailwind CSS inside the Next.js application. So now let's move on and let's just learn about the Tailwind step by step. So here, now we have just set it up the Next.js with the Tailwind, and it is working totally fine. And here, what are we doing is we have just defined a component function, and inside this function, we are returning a div with a class name of the app. And then inside that, we are rendering a hello world, and then we have the class name of the text to Excel. So what is this class name? So if you will just hover over this class name, you can see now we have a class of the text to Excel, and there we are just applying some of the CSS styles. So we have some CSS styles inside this class. So this exactly shows us that what is a utility class. So a utility class is a class which takes some of the styles of the CSS and then it generates a specific class for that style. So those are the utility classes. So what this utility class is doing, the text to Excel. So it is taking out the font size property of the CSS and it is providing the font size of 1.5 rem and the 24 pixels equivalent. And then it took the style of the line height and then it provided the style to the 2 rem. So then after putting out these styles from the CSS, then it generated this class and it provided these two styles inside this class. So now this text to Excel is a utility class inside the Tailwind CSS. So you can see if we just provide another class like the text 3XL, now the text styles will be even bigger. You can see now the text style has been increased. And then you can see if you will hover over it once again you can see now with the text 3XL class, this is different class once again. And here we have different values for the CSS styles. So these are the utility classes inside the Tailwind. So now let's have a look at some basic utility classes inside the Tailwind CSS. So here we have some basic utility classes of the Tailwind CSS and comparing it with the actual CSS as well. So you can see that Tailwind has the independent class for each style. Like you can see we have the text to Excel. It has the independent class like the text to Excel. And then we have some styles like the font size property and the line height property. So that's how the Tailwind works. And there you can see now we have the utility classes and then we have the actual CSS which is working under the hood. So first we have the utility class of the background white. We have the BG white. It means the background is white. But what actually is the CSS? So in this CSS, it is the background dash color. We have the background color property and we have defined the color for the white. So you can see this style is equivalent to this styles inside the CSS. So this is a Tailwind utility class and this is the actual CSS which is being applied to this class. And same for the P10 and the M10. So P10 is the padding. So we provide the padding as the 10 and we have the 40 pixels and then we have the margin of the 10, then we have the margin of the 40 pixels. But why this 10 and 40? Because 1 in the Tailwind utility is equals to the 4 pixels. So 1 is 4 pixels. It means 4 into 10. And then we have the margin for the 10, we have the margin here as the 40. So these are the utility classes and these are the actual CSS which works under the hood. And again, same if we provide the display property as the flex. So if we provide the flex property inside the utility, it means we have just provided the display as the flex. Same for the flex row. If we provide the flex row, it means we have provided the style of the flex direction and the style name is flex direction into row. And if we provided the justify center, it means we have just provided the justify content into the center. So these are just the basic utility classes of the Tailwind CSS and comparing it with the actual CSS which is being applied. So that's it for the utility classes inside the Tailwind and I will see you inside the next lecture. So now we have seen the basic utility classes of the Tailwind with the actual CSS. So now let's have a look at how does the Tailwind CSS works. So how does the Tailwind CSS works if we define any class? So first it parses the configuration file. So the Tailwind reads your tailwind config.js file to determine that which utility classes to generate. And this file includes the configuration options like for the colors, for the spacing, for the font sizes, for the breakpoints and even much more. So it parses the configuration file which reads your tailwind config file to determine that what are the classes that the Tailwind needs to generate. And after passing the configuration file, after reading the utility classes, then it generates the CSS utilities. So after seeing all of these things, so it generates a CSS file that contains the utility classes based on the past configuration file. And these utility classes are automatically generated based on the options that you have specified into your configuration file. So if you have added any options into your configuration file, like for the colors, for the breakpoint, so all of these classes will be automatically generated based on the options. And after this, what it does, so then it processes and optimizes your CSS code. So the Tailwind is known for the optimization. So after all of the CSS classes, so after defining the CSS file of the utilities, then it optimizes your CSS code. So the Tailwind CLI runs the post CSS plugins onto the generated CSS file to optimize the output of your CSS. So it runs the post CSS plugins and the post CSS is just like a preprocessor that transform your CSS code using the JavaScript plugins. So what it does is, so it runs the post CSS plugins onto the generated CSS to optimize the CSS file. And the optimizations will include, like, it will remove all of your unused styles, and then it will minify the CSS file, and then all of the optimizations will be completed. So that's how it optimizes and it processes your CSS file. And then finally, after all of the things, then it generates the output CSS after all of these steps. So after passing the configuration, after generating the CSS utilities, after optimizing and after processing your CSS file, then finally it will generate the output CSS code. So it generates a minified CSS file that you can include into your HTML markup, like even you can include that into your final bundle package. And that file contains all of the necessary styles for your website that we have used. And you can use the utility class provided by the Tailwind to style your HTML elements or the JSX tags. So that's a complete overview that how does the Tailwind CSS works and how does it compiles your code. So now I think now you have a knowledge that how does the Tailwind CSS works and how are the classes, what are the utility classes. And now we have read all about the Tailwind CSS in theory. So now let's move on into the practical way in which we can build some mini projects to see what are the things that we can achieve through the Tailwind CSS. So now let's move on into the practical part now. So now we know a little bit about the Tailwind CSS. And now let's move on and let's build a very basic project with the Tailwind CSS, which will be a header of any application. So we'll be building a header of the application built with the Tailwind CSS. So we'll be applying some of the Tailwind utility classes to complete that header. So I can move on into the directory. We can move on into the app. We can create a new folder that can be a components. And inside the components folder, now we can move on. We can just define a new component that can be the header. So we can be the header.tsx. And now inside this file, now we'll be defining our header of the application. So for that, now let's move on. Let's define the function. So we can have the function header. And after that, we'll be just exporting this function as well. So we can have the export default as this function. So now we have the function header, and now we can render the header inside that like this. And now we can move on into the page. So here we are rendering the div, but we can directly move on into the layout file. And here after this body, so in this body, we can remove this children. We can just render the header inside that. So this can be the header, and inside that we can render the header of the application. So we can have the header like this. And now we can move on and we can define a main content inside the body. That can be the main. And now inside the main, we'll be rendering the children. So main will be rendering a children inside the next.js. So if we just say, if we move on to the application, so here you will be seeing on every page, you will be seeing the header inside that. So if you move on to any other page inside the next.js, but you will be seeing the header on the top, because onto the root layout, we have the HTML file, and in the HTML file, we are rendering the body, and first content that we have is the header. So now you can see, now we have the header. It is blank header, so we do not have anything as of now. So now let's move on into the header and let's close all other files. So we can close others. We can close the sidebar menu as well. So we have the export default function header. So now for header, we know that we'll be requiring some of these links. So we can define the array of the links. So we can have the links like this, and that can be an array. So the array can be, we can have the services, we can have the block, we can have the students. So we'll be just creating a header for suppose like a school or like a educational institutes. So we can create the header for that type of application. And now we can move on, and here we are rendering the div. So we can remove the div as of now, and then we can directly render a nav tag like this. So we can have the nav, and inside the nav, we'll be having a UL. So we'll be having the UL in which we'll be having a lot of links. We'll be having these links inside that. And now before the UL, we'll be rendering the logo of this application as well. So we can have the logo, and then we'll be having some text of that logo as well. So we'll be defining the content like this. So now we can move on into the nav. So you can see there won't be anything as of now. So we can move on into the nav. We can move on to the class name. So we can just provide some of the utility classes to build this header. So as we already know about the CSS, that how the CSS is, that how does the CSS works, what are the CSS classes, and what are the CSS styles. So we can just implement some of the utility classes from the Tailwind CSS to apply these styles. So as we just saw some of the basic utility classes from the Tailwind, so we can use the background. So we can use the background that can be the gray. And so there are around 10 shades of each color inside the Tailwind. So starting from the 50, 100, 200 and going on till the 900. So we have 10 shades for each color. So we can give the background as the gray 800, background gray 800. And then what we can do, So we'll be rendering the logo, we'll be rendering the UL. So we can just put the display as the flex. So for the flex display, we can just use the flex. But here inside the application, we won't be seeing anything because we haven't specified the height and we do not have any children inside that. So here we have provided the flex as the display. If you will just hover over this class, so you have the flex class, and inside that the class of the CSS, the style of the CSS is the display flex. And now we can move on. We can just provide a couple of more styles, like we can have the justify content. So that should be the between. So we'll be having the justify between because we need the justify content to be aligned into the space between. So we'll be having some spacing between them. We can have the items as well. So we can have the items. We can have the center. So what this will do, you can hover over the every class inside the Tailwind. You can get all of these styles too. So here we have these styles for the align items, and it is saying that align items to the center. And after that, what we can do, so we can define the height. So for each height, you can see starting from the 0, if you will just access the 0 height, now you have some height, and then you have the 1, it is 4 pixels. Again, for the 2, it is 8 pixels. So the 3, it is 12 pixels. The 4, it is 16 pixels. So you can specify all of the properties of the height. So suppose we need the height of around 20 into 4, that should be the 80. And then we can have some padding as well, like the 4. So we can have the P-4 for specifying the padding as the 4, which is 16 pixels. So this will be all for the navigation. So if we save, if we move on to the application, if we just move to 100%, so here you can see now we have a basic navigation bar inside that, a basic nav tag with some styles. So for the logo, I'll be using this hero icons package. So you can see this is the hero icons, and what it does, so it provides you a couple of icons with their SVGs and with the JSX as well. So you can see we are building a website for an educational institute. So we can move on, we can copy the SVG icon, we can copy that, and then we can paste that here. So in this logo, we can remove that and then we can paste that here. And then you can see after this, we have an error, like we have the class. So we need to convert this to the class name like this. So we'll be having the class name. So if we move on to the application, so here you can see inside the top left corner, inside the start of the navigation bar, we have the icon. And now you can see now we have the icon, we have the class names as well. So you can see we have the class names of width, we have 6 value, we have the height, we have the 6. We can define the color as well. So we can have the text -white to implement this color. If we save, if we move on to the application, so now you can see now we have the color as well. So you can see it is working totally fine. So now we have this color. So this is how the Tailwind works. And now if we need like the company name as well after this logo, then how can we do that? So we can just move on. We can just provide the paragraph after this SVG. So we can have the paragraph, and I will now just minimize this SVG tag. So now we'll be having this paragraph. So we can just provide a couple of styles for the paragraph as well. So we can have the class name, and there we can provide the text. We can have the yellow 50. We can provide the margin left as the 4. And if we just add something like this, so we can have the edu hub like this. If we just save, if we move on to the application, so now we have the edu hub inside the center of the screen. So you can see now we have the edu hub inside the center, but we need the edu hub after this logo. So how can we do that? So it will be automatically aligned after the logo once we write all of those links. So that will be the functionality. So after that, now we can move on. We can provide the ML4, and then what we can do, so we can just put the font as well. So if we need the bolder font, a little bolder font, now what we can do, so we can provide the font as the semi-bold. So it will just apply the font weight of 600 into this style. So you can just apply that style. You can apply that font semi-bold. Now you can see now you have a little bit bolder font with that. And if you want to increase the font size as well, again, you can use the text-to-XL property. So now you can see now you have a little larger font with that. And now let's move on. Let's define the links as well. So we'll be having a couple of styles for the UL as well. So we can give the class name, that can be the flex. And after that, what we can do, so we can just put the justify as well. So we can have the justify from the start. So we need the items from the start. So we have the flex property, and now we can just put the gap between the items. Like gap can be around 6 pixels would be okay. We can give the gap of around 6. That would be compared to 24 pixels. So we have the gap of this 6. Then we can just provide a list as well. We can have the list -none. So we won't be having the disk effect inside the list. And now we can move on. We can just provide the links inside that. So again, we can use the React approach. We have the dynamic links. So we can use the link set like this. We can use the map function with that. So with the map function, what we can do, so we can render a callback for each link that we have. So for each iterator, we can render a callback. And inside that, we can render a list item tag. So we can render the li tag with that. And we can put the key as well. So the key would be the link itself as of now. So we can just put the link because we have around 3 links as of now. And after this li, we can provide the a tag as well for providing that link. So for the a, we can provide the ref as the hash. and then we can just provide the value of the link inside that. And the link would be, we can just provide the link itself like this. So now you can see now we have the links as well inside that. And then you can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So now we have the links over there. But now if we just move on, you can see now these are not visible at all. So we can move on, we can just provide some color. So we can move on, we can just provide the colors to the parent UL element, because if we provide the style to the parent, it will automatically be applied to the list item as well. So we can just provide, we can provide the text, we can have here the gray, that should be gray, 100 or 200 would be okay. If we provide that style, if we save, and now you can see now we have the list items as well. So you can see now we have the colors of that, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine once again. And now we can move on, we can just provide a font as well. So again, you can see this font is not looking good. So we can just increase the font weight of the font. So we can move on. Again, we can use the font as the semi-bold. And if we save, if we move on to the application, so now you can see now we have the semi-bolder font. And then you can see it is working totally fine. So you can see now we have defined all of that. So you can see now it is looking good. And now the last step of this header. So we can just move this edu hub like here. We can just move this edu hub here. So we can move on and we can just provide the paragraph text. So here we have the paragraph, we have the text yellow, we have the margin left as the 4, we have all of the things. So we can move on into the paragraph. So after the text to Excel, we can provide the margin from the right. So we can have the MR, and that should be the auto. So it will automatically aligned after the right margin. So now you can see now it's aligned into the left, and then you can see it is looking very good. So now you can see within a couple of minutes, we have recreated the header of any application. So this is the educational institute. So we have just provided the header of this application, and then you can see it is working perfectly fine. So you can see now this is how we can just create some of the basic projects with the Tailwind. So in this project, now we have built this header and it's looking perfectly good. And now let's move on into the bigger projects in which we'll be just defining a landing page of this application as well. So now that's it for this header project. So in this lecture, we will see that how to handle the focus states, the hover states, and other states within the Tailwind CSS. And these states are most used inside the real world applications, because all of the modern applications which has great designs, which has great UI, uses these states to build their UI. So let's see that how to handle the hover, focus, and other states within the Tailwind CSS. So let's see the first style that we currently have will be the hover. And I think you already know about the hover. So when you point over any UI element, it is known as the hover state. So then the hover states get active, and then it will apply the styles which you provide to the hover state. And same with the active as well. So if you have the navigation bar, and if you want to style a currently active link, like if you're on the about page, if you want to apply some styles to the about page which is currently active, then you can just provide some styles to the active. And then we have the focus as well. Like if a UI element is currently in the focus, then you can apply some states to the focus as well. And same with the first and the last as well. So if you want to apply some styles to the first or last child of any parent, like suppose we have a div, if you want to apply some styles to that div, like the first and the last child, then you can use the first and last properties with these states. So these are just very few states which are most commonly used within the Tailwind or any other CSS libraries as well. So these are just very few states. So let's directly head over to the Tailwind CSS documentation to see that how to apply these styles within the Tailwind. So I'm into the tailwindcss.com and I'm into this section of the hover, focus, and other states. So in this section, you will see that how to handle all of these states. So let's say suppose we have this button, and then you can see once I will point over this button, then the hover style would be then applied. And how to apply the hover style? We just add the hover like this. We add the hover, colon, and then this style name. So you can add the hover styles like this. And then you can see you can have the pseudo classes like the hover, you have the focus, first child, required, and there are so many other styles that you can use within the Tailwind as well. And you can see how can we use these styles. So suppose you want to apply the hover, focus, and active, all of these styles inside that. So you can use the normal button. You have the BG violet of the 500. And if you want to apply some hover style, like once you will hover over this button, then the color of the background would change to the 600 shade from the 500. So if you will hover over this, then you can see now the background has been changed with the 500 to the 600. And then you can see once this button would be active, once we click on this button, then you can see now we have the styles of the 700. And then you can see now we have the styles of the 700 once the button is currently active. So that's how the active also works. So now it is currently in the active. And then you can see we have the focus as well. Once this is in focus, then you can see outline has been none. And then you can see inside the focus, there is one more style. Like if you want to apply multiple styles of any element, So you can use multiple definitions like this, like focus, we have the outline none, and with the focus, they have provided the ring. So ring is now adding the ring inside the focus. So now you can say it is currently in the focus, it is currently in the tab focus. So then you can see once I will move out of the focus, once I will click outside. So you can see now we do not have these styles available. So you can see the focus has these colors, like we have the focus outline none. We are removing the default outline. We are adding a ring inside that. And then the ring has the color of the violet of the 300. So you can see once it is in focus. So that's how these styles work. So let's just see the first and last as well. So you can see now we have here a div. So suppose we have the UL and suppose this is a list item. So for every list item, we have these names and their profiles. So let's see the first child that we have. So inside the first, they have provided the padding top as the 0. And inside the last as well, they have provided the padding bottom as the 0. So this is how they can just define some styles within the Tailwind CSS for the first and the last styles. Like you define the first colon, then the style name, the last colon and the style name. So that's how you can use all of these styles. And then you can just head over to the documentation. So there are a lot of things with these states. So you can just learn about them from the Tailwind documentation as well. So now let's just move on and let's just test these values. So if we just open our application, here we have the header, here we have the code. We had just simple header as of now. We have here the navigation tag, we have here the SVG for the logo, we have the paragraph tag, and then we are rendering all of the list items inside that. And then we can move on into the create next step. So here you can see now we have the services, blocks, and the students. And we were building a navigation bar for suppose like educational institute. So let's move on and let's see some of these styles. Like we have here the A tag, the anchor tag. If we provide the class names like this, so we can have the class name. And suppose on the hover, we can add the hovers like this. So this is the hover. In the hover, if you want to add some background color, so we can have the background. And then I can give the background like BG Slate 700 or 600 as well. So if we save, if we move on to the application, then you can see if I will now just hover over this, then you can see now we have some background color inside that. So you can see if I just maximize, so you can see once I will hover over any of the elements, so you can see these styles will be then applied. And then you can see you can also add some padding as well inside that. You can move on into this style like this. And then you can have the padding legs, padding like that should be somewhere around 2 would be enough. So you can have the padding and then you can add some space. So you can see once you will just hover over this element, then you can see now you have some background shadow inside that. You have the background color and then you can change the colors as well that you want. So you can give the colors like this as well. Like you can give the background gray as well. So you can give any color that you want. So you can see now inside the hover, you have the first state. And then if you want to add other things as well inside the hover, then you can again use the hover like this. So if you want to apply the multiple styles inside the hover, then this is not supported as of now. So every time you need to apply a styles for the hover, you need to add the hover, then the style, again the hover, then the style. Because this is not currently supported inside the Tailwind, but maybe they can add this support inside the future versions of the Tailwind. So for every style that you need to add inside the hover, you need to add the hover element like this. So you can add the hover, and then suppose inside the hover, I will add the background as the rounded. So like we have the background color, so we can add the rounded background color like this. So we can have here the rounded. So we can have the rounded and we can use the MD for the rounded. It will be 6 pixels. So if we will save, if we'll move on to the application once again. So here you can see once I will hover over this, then you can see now we have a little bit nice effect of the rounded corners. So we have the rounded corners of the background and then you can see it is also looking good. So we have these styles for the hover. And if you want to apply more styles, then you can play around with all of these styles that you want. So now we have these hovers and suppose we want to apply some styles for the active link. Then how can we do that? So we can use the active. And suppose inside the active link, I want to do like, I want to change the background color once again. So for the active, we can change the background color. And suppose the background color can be, we can give the pink color like this, or like we can give the purple color like this. So that should be purple, like suppose 800 or 700 of the purple. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see once I will click on this link and you can see this link is currently active. So then you can see now we are not moving into any other route. So the active states get lost. So you can see, but once we will just click over this element, once we continue clicking, so you can see now we have the active state inside this button. So we can add for this as well. We can add for this as well. So that's how the active works inside that. So if the link will currently be active, so we'll be seeing the active like this. So that's how we can define the active. And then if you want to apply some styles for like the focus, so you can use the focus like this. And then inside the focus, if you want to apply some styles, like you want to apply some ring effect again that you saw inside that as well. So you can use the ring and inside that again, you can use the focus once again. So you can use the focus And then you can use the ring color as well. So you can have the ring, like suppose you have here the green ring like this. So you can have the green of 600. So if you will just save, if you'll move on to the application once again, so you can see once the element will be in the focus. So you can see if the element will be in focus like this, so then we'll be seeing the ring effect like this. So you can have the ring. So you can see then we'll be having the ring effect inside that. So you can see once we'll move on to the services, now we have the ring effect inside that. And then you can see it is working perfectly fine. And then you can see that's how we can use the ring effects like this. So we have the ring color, but only if the tab isn't currently in focus. So you can see once we'll move on to other tab with the switch as well. So here we have the ring, here we have the ring, and here we have the ring. So that's how the ring works inside that. So that's how you can apply the ring effects as well like this. So you can play around with all of these values. Like you can see there's one more thing. Like once we are in the ring, so you can see once we move out of the focus, then we do not have the rounded corners. So for that, you can again use the rounded for the focus as well. So you can have the focus, you can have the rounded, we can have the MD property. So you can see now we have the MD property with the rounded as well. So you can see once we will switch to the tab like this, and like this as well. So now we have these properties with the ring as well. So that's how it works inside that. And then you can see we are seeing the outline as well. So if you want to remove the outline, then you can use again the focus. You can use the outline, that should be none. So if you remove the outline, now you have the green color with the outline as well. So if you move on to the block, now we have the green outline color. Same for the students as well. So that's how these states works inside the Tailwind CSS. So you can play around with all of these values with other states as well. So that's it for this lecture. So now we are wrapping up with this. So from this lecture onwards, now we'll be building a project which will be a about us page for that application. So earlier we were building the header of an educational institute, which is the company name of the EduHub. So this time we'll be building an about us page with that. So we'll be using Tailwind CSS, and then we'll be using basic utility classes, the hover states and other states with that. So let's see what will be the demo of that application. So here we'll be building the project like this. So we'll be having the EduHub, we have the header of this application, and then we'll be having the states like the activities. We have the institute name like the EduHub Institute of Technology. And then we have some static text over there. And then we'll be having the images like this. So we'll be having some images. We'll be having a lot of styles over there. We'll be having hover states, and we'll be having other states like this. And this will be a fully responsive project. So we'll build the application in the desktop first, and then we'll make it responsive inside the mobile devices as well. So let's start on this project. So here we have this header component, and now what can we do inside that? So here we have the links of the services, blocks, and the students. So instead of the students, now we can change it to the about. So here we have the anchor tag, but for using the links with the client side routing inside the Next.js, so we use the link component provided by the Next.js for navigating through the different links. So for that, we can remove this link, or we can just use the link instead of this a tag. So we can use the link from the Next.js that would be available from the Next.js. So here it will be imported from the next link. And here we have the class name, we have all of the things like this, and then we have the link inside that. And then we can use the ref tag as well to move to the different pages. So we can move on. We can just provide the link like this, or we can have the link dot to lowercase. So we can have the link dot to lowercase like this. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so you can see everything would be same. And now we can move on. We can just provide these pages as well, like the services, the block, and the about. So let's move on. Inside the app directory, let's create a new folder that can be the services. So we can have the services, and inside the services, now we'll be creating a page that should be the page.tsx. So that should be the page component, and then we can define the function. We can have the services like this. So services would be a functional component. We'll be exporting this as well. So we can have the export default like this, and then we can just return the JSX inside that with the div of the services like this. So we can have the services. We can move on. We can define the about, and inside the about, we'll be having the page.tsx. So with this syntax, so it will create the folder of the about, and inside that it will create the page.tsx with that. So we can hit enter. So now we have the about page.tsx. So we can have the export default function. We can have the about, and inside the about, now we have the about page. So we can move on. We can we can have the block slash we can have the page.tsx once again, and then we can just paste this function over there. So we can have the block like this. So now we have all of the pages. So if we just save, if we just refresh this application, if we move on to the services, click on services. So now you can see now we are into slash services. So here now we enter the services. If we click on the block, now you can see now we'll be inside the block page. So now we enter the block. If we click on the about, so now we'll be inside the about. But here we have the text of the services, because inside every component we have the services. So that should be the block here. That should be the about here like this. So now we'll be having all of the things inside that. So inside the about, we have the about, blog, we have the blog, we have the services inside the services. So everything should work perfectly fine now. So here we are into the about. So now we need to design this page so we can close other files. And now instead of this div, now what can we do? So we can use this section. So we can have the section over there like this. So that should be the section tag. And now we can just make some more space. And now inside this section, now what can we do? So we can just provide the class name, and inside that we'll be providing the width. So the width would be of the full screen. So we can give the width screen to apply the width of the 100% of the screen. We have the 100 viewport height. And now we can just define the margin from the top as well. So that should be somewhere around 12 into 4, 48 pixels for the margin from the top. And now we can move on. We can just provide a div again. That can be a container for all of the things. So we can have the class name. That should contain the class of the flex. We can give the flex property as one like this. So the flex would be fully covered from this div. And now what can we do? So we can give the justify content. That should be from the start. And I think we need to define the flex as the column as well. So we'll be having the items inside the column basis. And then we can provide the gap as well like the 6. So we can have the 6 of the gap like this. And now we can move on. And I think we can also provide the items of the center to align the items inside the center. So we can have the items dash center. And now we can move on. We can just provide some of the more basic stylings inside that. So now we'll be having the H5. So for the H5, we can have the class name. That should be, so we can have the font, we can have the bold. So we'll be using the bolder font. We can just increase the size as well. So we can have the text dash, we can have the 4XL for increasing the size. So we can have the 4XL, and then we can define the activities like this. So we can have the activities. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here we have, if we move on to the about page, so here we have the activities like this, and it is looking fine. So here we have the activities, and then you can see it is looking fine. And now we can move on again. And here we can just define the paragraph as well after this. So we can have the paragraph, we can have the styles as well. We can have the class name of something around, we can give the text, that should be 2XL inside the text. And then we can provide the uppercase for this, and that would be the company name, like the institute name. And then we can just provide the font weight. So we can have the font, like we can have the lighter font with that. So we can have the font light like this. And then we can provide the company name, like we can provide the edu hub. And now after that, now we can just move on. We can just provide some of the text after this. So here we have the institute name. Then we can have some text to represent that institute. So we can have the paragraph tag once again. We can give the class name again. And the class name this time can be, we can give the width of this, like that should be 3/5. So the 3/5 width, if we apply the 3/5, that should be of the 60%. And now we can move on again. And we can just provide, I think after this, we can have the text of the center. So that should be aligned inside the center. And then we can move on. We can just provide the text property as the 2XL once again. So we have the text 2XL like this once again. So that will be the text. So as of now, we can just provide the lorem ipsum text. So if you are using the Visual Studio Code like this, I'm using same. So we can just provide the lorem like this. So we can have the lorem. Then we can just use the amount of words that we need to require inside the lorem. So if we need around 15 words, then we can use the 15, and then we can hit enter. So it will just create the dummy text of 15 words. So now we have the 15 words dummy text inside that. And now we can move on. If we save, so now we have the lorem ipsum, and then you can see it is looking fine. And now we can just provide the activities section as well. So for that, now we'll be using the div once again. So inside that, we can have the class name. We can have the flex inside that. So here we'll be using the flex box once again. And then what we'll be doing, so we'll be using the flex as the row inside that. So we'll be having by default of the row. So we won't need to justify that. So we have the flex row. We can just provide the justified. That should be the center. We can also have the items inside that. That should be the center. And then we can just put the gap between the items. So that should be somewhere around, I think 5 or 6 would be enough. So we can give the 6. And now inside that, now we can define 3 images. So we can have the images. So for the images, you can get the URL of that images as well. So you can move on into the Pixabay, and then you can just search for the college inside that, because we are also creating the website for an educational institute. So we can just copy a couple of images. Like this image is looking good. So we can click on that image, and then we can just click on copy image address. But if you want to download that image, then you can use the download option as well. So now you can move on. You can just copy the address of that image like this. So you can paste that over here. Like that would be the first image. And then we can use this image as well, and it is looking good. So we can just move on to this image. We can just copy the image address. Then we can move on. Then we can define another image tag like this. So we can have the image, and inside the source, we can have this image address. So we can just copy that. So here we'll be defining the URL like this. And now we can move on. We can select the third image as well. So we can move on and we can use this image over there. So we can use this image and then we can just copy the image address. And then we can just define another image tag. So we can have the image. In this source, we can define this source. And then we can define the alt as well. So inside the alt, we can use the img1. Inside this alt, we can use the img2. And inside this alt tag, we can use the img3 like this. So if we save and if we move on to the application, so what we will see, so here we have 3 images inside that. So here you can see if I just now move on to 25% or 50%. So here we have 3 images. And now we can just align the sizes of these images. So we can again move on to the 100%. We can align the sizes. So here what we can do, so inside the image, we can again use the class name. So we can select all of these images. We can press Ctrl and F2 and then we can move on. We can put the class name like this. So we can have the class name, then it would be applied to all of these images. So inside the class name, what we can do, so we can again use the width, that should be the 1/4 I think, or we can use the 1/3 for the width, and then we can move on and then we can just provide the shadow. So that should be the shadow, that should be LG. And if you want to provide some hover states as well, so we can use the hover, and inside the hover what we can do, so we can use the shadow as the 2XL. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see now we have the shadows inside that. So here you can see, but I think the images are too big for that. So we can use the 1/4 inside that. So we can move on, we can use the 1/4 for this. So we can use the 1/4. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see now the images are looking good. So we have first image, we have second image, and then you can see we have third image. So you can see in between very less amount of time, we have defined the about us page as well of any educational institute. First, we have here the title, then we have here the institute name, we have some text over there, and then we have some images over there. And now we can move on and we can just define the button as well after that. So we can have the button, we can define the class name like this. And inside the class name, you can define any class name, like you can have the border. That should be, I think we can give the color, like that should be something around red or 500. Then we can move on, we can just provide the border width as well. So we can have the border dash 2 pixels like this. So we can have 2 for the 2 pixels of the border. We can use the padding as well. So that should be P2. We can use the rounded as well. If you want to button to be rounded, you can use the rounded as MD. And then we can just select some text, like we can have the view more like this. So we can have the view more. If we save, if we move on to the application. So I think we have the button here, but we need the button after this div. So we can have this button after this div. So here you can see now this button is there and it is looking perfectly good. So now you can see now we have defined the page of the about us. And now we have built this about us page. And now inside the next lecture, what we will see is we will be just customizing the styles of the Tailwind. So here you can see now we have the font family like this activities. But if we will just move on into this, so there's no option to provide a different font. If you will just move on to the paragraph, so you can say you can have the font. So you do not have any option of providing the different fonts. So we'll see that how we can just provide the different font and how we can customize the CSS of the Tailwind. So let's wrap up this lecture. So here we have just defined the about us page of our application. So we have used some of the basic utilities classes of the Tailwind and they are working quite fine. And now you can see now we have just used here the default font of the HTML. So what if I need to use a different font? So how can I use that? So there are multiple fonts available. If we move to the inspect, if we just select this element and if we can apply some of the styles, like we can have the font, we can have the family. And there you can see there are multiples of fonts available to use these fonts. But what if I need to use this font from the Tailwind? So if we just move on, if we just apply some font into this activities element. So for the activities, we have the H5 element. So what if I need to use a different font for this H5? So we can use the font dash the family name. So here we have the family name of the sans, we have the serif, and then we have the mono. So we only have 3 font families available within the Tailwind, nothing more. But what if I need to use a different font? So how can we define a different font within the Tailwind? So here you can see here we have multiple fonts available. Like if we just use the font family once again. So there are multiples of font available, but inside the Tailwind, we only have 3 fonts which are available, the sans, serif, and the mono. So how can we define a different font? So for defining a different font, you need to customize this CSS. You need to add your own custom CSS to apply some of the fonts because these are not available inside the Tailwind, but you can do that inside the Tailwind as well. But we'll look into that section later. So let's see that how we can apply some custom CSS styles to the Tailwind. So here comes a topic that applying the custom CSS for the Tailwind. So how can we do that? So we can do that with the layer directive. So what is the layer? So here inside the Tailwind, we have 3 layers. First, we have the base, then we have the components, then we have the utilities. So we have 3 layers. So what we can use, so here we have the reserved keyword of the layer, which we use as a layer directive, and which tells the Tailwind that which bucket a set of custom CSS styles belongs to, like in which bucket the CSS styles belong to, like the buckets are base, the components, and the utilities. So in which bucket these styles are belong to. So with the @layer, this is a reserved keyword inside the Tailwind. So we can apply some custom CSS styles for this Tailwind with the @layer. So let's see how can we do that. So if we move on into our application, if we open the CSS file, so here we have the globals.css, and here we have 3 layers, the base, the components, the utilities. And if we want to apply some custom CSS style, like suppose inside the base, if we want to apply some custom CSS styles, then we can use the @layer directive. We have the @layer, and @layer, after that, we need to define like in which layer we need to define some styles, like inside the base, the components, or utilities. We can apply for the base because the base provides you some of the default styles of your application as well. So we can use the base, and inside that you need to apply that in which tag you need to apply some styles. Like if you want to apply for the body, then you can use the body like this. So you can use the normal CSS with that, and inside the body you can use any font that you want. You can use font family like this. You can have the font family, then you can define any font. Like here we have multiple fonts available, like we have the cursive. So if we save, if we move on to the application, then here you can see now we have defined the font for the body. So it will apply the font family of the cursive to whole body tag. The body contains all of your HTMLs, so it will apply to your whole HTML file. And here you can see now we have the edu hub. We have all of the things available inside the cursive font. So that's how you can customize the CSS inside that. So you can use the font family, you can use any other font family as well. You can use any custom CSS style as well. Like if you want to provide some styles for the H5. So suppose we have the H5, and inside the H5 we are rendering the activities. So you can provide your own custom styles to the H5 as well. So you can use the text decoration like this. You can use the underline as well. So with applying this, there will be underline inside this font. If we move on to the application, so here you can see now inside this, we have the underline as well. So that's how you can use the layer directive to customize your CSS. So here we have just defined this style. And what if now I want to use a custom CSS style for only this activities? So either we can use the H5 tag like this. We can use the H5. We can provide the font family. We can use a different font family, like we have the monospace. So the monospace font will be then applied. So that's how we can use it. But what if I need to use a custom CSS style for this font, and for this font? So how can we do that? So we can move on. We can provide another layer. So we can have the another layer, and that should be of the components, or we can have for the utilities. So we can use the utilities like this. And inside the utilities, what can we do? So we can use the class name. Like the class name can be, we can use a class name, like we can have the font, and that should be, I think the font of, suppose like cursive once again. So you have the cursive, and inside the font cursive, now you can apply some of the styles. You can apply some styles, like you can use font family like this. The font family should be the cursive. So you can have the cursive, and now you can use this font cursive into your page. So you can move on. You can just provide this style over there. You can just copy that from there. You can move on into the page. You can use this font as a cursive. So you can have, so you have the font cursive. So here you can see now you have the cursive font inside that. If you refresh the page, so now you have the font as the cursive. So if you will just select this element, so you have the font family of the cursive. So that's how you can use, and that's how you can apply the custom CSS styles to your application, and that's how it works. And one more thing with that, so you can move on, and here we have the apply. So what is the apply directive? So the apply directive uses the Tailwind utility classes to define your custom CSS styles. So if we again move on into this, so here we have the H5 font family of the monospace. So if we want to use, so if I do not want to use the font family, if I want to use something else which is provided by the Tailwind, then we can use @apply. So you can use the apply, and then you can use any style of the Tailwind that you want. So here we have multiple styles of the Tailwind which are available. So what we can do, so we can use the underline like this. So if we use the underline, so here you can see now we'll be having the underline inside this H5 as well. So that's how the apply works. So the apply uses the Tailwind utility classes to define your custom CSS code. And that's how you can apply your custom CSS within the Tailwind CSS, and that's how it works. So here we have just used the custom styles inside the Tailwind CSS, and there you can see we have just used the layer directive, and inside the layer we have just used the base. We are customizing the base, and inside the base styles we are customizing the H5 tag, And inside the h5 tag, we have just used the apply to apply some of the classes of the Tailwind, and we are using the underline like this. So what this will do, so this will just apply the underline text into the h5 property of our application and inside the base. And there you can see we have the utilities as well. If you want to apply some custom utility classes, then we can use like this. We have the font cursive, then we can use the font family like this. So when we will use this class inside anywhere of our application like this, we have the font cursive. So this font family would be then applied to this. So that's how the customization work. But this was the first way of customization inside the Tailwind, like how you can customize the styles inside the Tailwind. So this was the first option. So there are two more options available. So the second option, in which you can just customize the CSS, you can head over to the documentation as well to see all about that. So you can move on, you can just customize the Tailwind theme. So you have the theme of the Tailwind and it is defined inside this. Like if you move on to the Tailwind config file, so inside the Tailwind config file, you have the theme. So here you have the content and there you can see here you have the theme, and inside the theme, you can extend your own theme as well. So here you can see here we have just used the h5 tag. We have just used the apply underline. So what you can do, so you can just remove that from here, or either you can comment that from here, and then you can move on into the Tailwind. You can just customize, or you can just extend the theme as well like this. So if you want to provide the custom font family like this, so you can have the font family like this, and there what you can do inside that, so you can use here the different value. Like if you want to use the cursive like this, so you can have the cursive. Then what you can do, so inside that you can just provide an array of the values. So you can have the cursive, or you can add another font as well. Like you can have the sans. Like if the cursive is not available, then you can use the sans. So what it will do, or what it is doing, so it is extending the font family of the internal Tailwind. So if you move on to the page, so this style will not work as of now, the font cursive. So we can say we can move on to the localhost 3000. So here we have the page. So if we move on into the page component, like we have the font sans, serif and the mono. So here you can see after applying the cursive, now we have another option inside the font to define a custom font family. So you can see earlier we only had three options, the sans, serif and the mono. But now we can see now we have the cursive as well. But inside that you can see if we will just hover over this class. So if I will hover, then you can see now we have the font family of the cursive and the sans. And same thing that we have defined inside the extend. So that's how it works. So you can see we have just defined the value for the cursive. We can define another value as well. You can use the fantasy as well like this. So you can use fantasy, and you can use the fantasy style like this. So you can remove this. You can use the fantasy. And if you just save, if you again move on to the page file, you can use the font fantasy as well. So you can see that's how this works. So that's how you can just extend the custom styles into the Tailwind CSS, into the internal Tailwind CSS, and that would be converted into a utility class, the extended utility class. So if we just save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see now we have the fantasy font over there. So you can see it is working perfectly fine. So here we have the fantasy. We can remove this and then we can use the cursive as well. So you can see now we have the cursive font over there and it is working perfectly fine. You can use a different font family for the activities as well. So you can have the font like this. So you can have the font. You can use the cursive or fantasy like this. So you can see that's how this works inside the Tailwind. And that's how you can just customize the Tailwind theme inside your application. So this was the second option that was available of how can we customize the style inside the Tailwind. And there is one more option available. If you just head over to the documentation once again, so here we have the Tailwind. So now we are done with the customizing your theme. So we are now customizing the theme. We can just use the arbitrary values. So what are the arbitrary values? So here you can see if we just apply some of these styles, like we have the text. Okay. So here we have the text. So here you can see here we have some of these styles. If we move on to the page, like we have the text for Excel. And inside that we have the font size of this 36 pixels, the line height of the 40 pixels. So here we have the text. So we can use a dynamic value like this. So it is known as an arbitrary value, but you can just provide any dynamic content like this. So you can have the 22 like this. So if we move on here, if we just apply some style like here inside this paragraph tag, inside the lorem ipsum tag, the text, we have the text property of the 2XL. So we can remove this and we can just use our own custom size of the text, like here with the 22 pixels. So we can use the 22 pixels like this. So if we save, if we again move on to the application here, so now you can see now the font size is smaller. So you can see that's how we can use the arbitrary values inside the Tailwind CSS and it will work fine. So you have the width as well. So you can just define the width as well as the arbitrary value. You can use the width and then you can just provide the 100% like this. So that would be the width of the 100%. So you can see that's how it works inside this. So that's how you can provide the arbitrary values. And it is very, very simple concept like this. So you can use background, your own color as well. You can just apply some mask as well. So you can see everything is very simple inside that. So you can provide the LG. So we will discuss about the breakpoints later. And there you can see we have all of the things that we can apply dynamically inside that. So that's how the arbitrary values works. So it is very easy to use because we provide our own dynamic styles into this. So that's it for the arbitrary values. So now we saw that how we can customize the styles inside the Tailwind CSS, and they were pretty easy. So first we use the CSS and then we define the layers for the base and for the utilities, and then we customize the style. And then second thing that we saw with the customization was with the theming object, that how we can customize or modify the theme. And then third thing that we saw was arbitrary values, that how we can provide the dynamic values to the Tailwind CSS. So that's how we can customize all of the things inside the Tailwind. So that's how it works. So now let's see that how we can make this application responsive on all of the screen sizes. So you can see if we just move on into the inspect panel, if we just open the dimensions of the iPhone XR, so you can see this application is not responsive inside any of the screen sizes. So you can see if you open it inside a mobile device, so you can see the links are taking a lot of space. You can see the text is taking a lot of space. The images doesn't even appear good. So you can see this is not responsive at all. So we need to make this application responsive into any of these screen sizes. So if the user, so suppose if the user opens this application inside like mobile device, inside a simple mobile device, and if it opens inside an iPhone XR, if it opens inside a big TV, so this application should be responsive on any of the screen size. So for that, we use the breakpoint system. So we use the breakpoint system inside that. So the breakpoint are just values of multiple screen sizes. So if we see the breakpoint, so here you can see now we have values for the small devices. Like for the small devices, they have the minimum width of the 640 pixels. And for the medium devices, they have the minimum width of the 768 pixels. And for the large devices, they have the minimum width of 1024. The extra large comes with the 1280 pixels. And for the 2XL comes with big TVs with the 1536 pixels. So these are the values for multiple breakpoints inside any of the CSS frameworks or inside this Tailwind. So you can see now we have the breakpoints for the small, for the medium, for the large, for the extra large, and for the 2XL. So here these are the pre-default values. So these are the predefined values inside the Tailwind which are available. So you can see, but if we just open our application, if we open this responsive design, or if we open this application, so there you can see now we have the iPhone XR, and there you can see now we have the width of 414 pixels. So you can see this is not responsible for the responsiveness. So you can see if we provide the styles for the small, for the medium, so this won't be applied to this application. So for that, we need to customize this styles point. So for that, you can see now we have the small devices. So we can just create another property that can be the extra small devices, which contains very small devices to the iPhone XR. So in that devices, our application will look perfectly good. So for that, you can see if we move on to the responsive design, so how can we apply these styles? So first, let's see that how we can apply these styles. So to add a utility class, so you can see to make it effect, so you need to use the property names, like for the device name, like for the medium, you define the width as the 32, and for the large devices, for the large screen sizes, you can provide the width as the 48. So that's how it works. So you define different styles for the different screen sizes, like for the medium and for the large. So same works inside any other screen sizes as well. Like you can see for the medium, you have the height full, you have the width of the 48. So that's how it works. And then you can say you can work on mobile first as well. So you can say that's how it works. So you can just provide the styles for multiple screen sizes, like for the small, for the medium, for the large, for the extra large. So here you can see that's how it works. So now we can move on, and there you can see now we have the values for the small, medium, large, extra large, 2XL. But as we discussed earlier, that we do not have the values for below the 640 pixels screen sizes. So how can we do that? So we can move on and we can customize the theme object once again. So we can move on into the Tailwind config file. So here you can see now we are already extending the font family. We are already extending some of the like pre-default themes of the Tailwind. So now let's move on. Let's define another property which is already available, which is the screens. So we can use the screens. So as we seen earlier that if I open this once again, so we have the small. So for the small, we have the 640 pixels. So we can define another screen that can be the extra small. So we can have the extra small. So that should be somewhere around, we can give the 300 pixels. So it will have the minimum width of the 300 pixels inside that. So that's how it works. But if you customize the screens, then only these screens will be available. So if we move on to the page, if you apply some styles, so you can see only the extra small will be available, not all other screen sizes. So if you're extending the theme object of the screens, then make sure you add for all of the screen sizes. So you can add these screen sizes as well, like for the small, for the medium, the large, extra large, and the 2XL. So you can add all of these values. So you can use these styles like this. We have the extra small, you have the small, you have the medium, you have the extra large. So I think we have missed the large. So that should be the large. Or I think we can have here the 1080 pixels like this. And then we have the extra large, and then we have the 2XL. So these are the screens that our application will work on. So now we can move on into the page and we can define some things. Like if we just move on into our application, so let me close all other things. So if I just close all other things, so here we have this application. So here you can see now the images are not looking good at all. So if I want to say that for the small screen sizes, like for the extra small screen sizes, like for the iPhone XR, so we need the flex direction as the column. So how can we do that? So we can move on into the Tailwind. So here you can see here we have the styles. So we can move on into the page. And here we have provided the flex property of the display. We have the justify center, we have the item center, we have the gap of 6, that should be 24 pixels. So now we can just use the small property, like we can have the access. So you can see the access is already available there. So for the access, what we can do, so we can have the flex, we can have the column. So we can have the column of the flex. So we can have the flex dash, we can have the call. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see inside the extra small screen sizes, so you can see now we have the flex property as the column. So if we move on into the big devices as well, so you can see if we move on into the large screen sizes, it will be available as the column, because so you are saying to the Tailwind that from the extra small screen sizes, the flex direction should be column. But if you want different on above the medium, like on the above the medium, you can provide the MD. So that should be, again, you can have the flex dash row like this. So if you save, if you move on to the application, so here you can see from the small devices, from the small to medium, now you will be having the flex direction as the column. But for the medium to next available screen size, you have the flex direction of the row. So that's how it works. So if we move on to the inspect panel once again, so you can see for the small devices, now you have, so now you can see now you have the images, and there you can see now you have the flex direction of the column. So that's how it works. And then you can use different for the small as well. So you can use different from the small, from the medium, for the large, for the extra large. So everything that you can use, it is available inside the Tailwind config screens. So now you can see now these images are looking, actually these images are not looking good. So we can just increase the width of these images. So we can move on, we can just provide some more things, like for the extra small once again, like here we have the image. So for the image, what we can do, so here we have the image width of 25%. So what we can do, so for the medium screen sizes, we can use this width, but for the small screen sizes, for the extra small, what we can do, so we can have the width, so that should be somewhere around, we can give like 2/4. So that should be 2/4, which is the 50% of the width. So you can see now we have the width of the 50%. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see now we have the width of 50% with that. So that's how it works. So now we can move on, we can make it 3/4 as well to increase the size once again. So here you can see now the size is being increased. So we can use these styles on all other images as well, like this, like for this as well, and for this as well. So that's how it works. So you can see now these images are looking responsive onto any other screen sizes. If we move on to the medium, you can see it is still looking good. If we move on to the small screen sizes, it is still looking good. So that's how it works. So now our images are responsive. So now if I want to say you that now this text should be having, like, we need to decrease the font size for different screen sizes. So we can move on again. So here you can see, here we have this paragraph. So now for this paragraph, what we can do, so here we have the width of 3/5, which means the width of the 60%. So that would be enough. And now we can move on. So here you can see now with the text of 22 pixels. So what we can do, so for the medium to the all available screen sizes, we can provide the text of 22 pixels, but we can just move on. We can just provide for the small as well. And for the extra small, what we can do, so we can have the text of somewhere around, we can give around 15 pixels of the text. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so here you can see now with the text of 15 pixels, if we just click that, so you can see now with the font size of 15 pixels, and then you can see it is looking good. But once we move on after the medium screen sizes, so now you can see now the text size has been increased. So that's how it works inside that. So you can see now it is looking perfectly fine. And now we can move on. We can just decrease the size of this text as well. So we can move on. Here we have the education name. So we can use same thing over there. So we can use there. We have the text to Excel, which means the font size of 24 pixels. So we can just use it for the medium. Like for the medium, we have the text to Excel. And for the extra small, so we can have the text. We can have like 1XL like this. So we can have the 1XL. So if we save, if we move on to the application, so you can see now the font size is smaller. So we can do this for the activities as well. So for the activities, we have the text for Excel. So that should be for the medium only. And for the small, what we can do, like for the small, or we can have the extra small, we can have the text that should be 2XL would be enough. So we can have the 2XL. So you can see now it is looking good as per the iPhone XR perspective. And now we can just decrease the spacing between them as well. So we can move on. So here you can see inside the header. So here we have the header.tsx. So here we have the navigation. Here we have the links. So here we have the gap of the 6. So we can just point for the medium. That should be gap 6. But for the extra small devices, the gap should be somewhere around 2 would be enough. So here you can see now we have lesser gap available. So you can provide gap as the 1 as well. So now you can see now you have very less gap between these link items. So now you can see that's how you can make everything responsive inside the Tailwind CSS. So now you can see now this application is fully responsive. If you open it into any of the devices, like you can see even in the 100%, it's looking good. Even in the 125%, it is looking good. You can open this inside the inspect. You can move on to the responsive as well. You can have the responsive. So you can see if we just move this here. So you can see once we open this inside any of the screen sizes, so that's how it works. So you can see it is fully responsive to any of the screen size available. So that's how it works inside the Tailwind, and that's how we can just make any application responsive inside the Tailwind CSS.